take these words and make them more than just my words, that you help me to preach. Help these people to grow closer to you by the things I say, the words of my mouth, the meditations of our heart. May they be acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. One of the greatest and most easily recognized Christmas traditions is this giant thing standing behind me, the Christmas tree. And one thing I found out this past week as I started researching into the origins is that every piece of the Christmas tree has a reason that it is the way it is, from the type of tree to the lights to the thing up on top to everything else that's on that. Everything has a reason. And what we're going to talk about today is that the story of Christianity is actually a story of life living between two very important trees. You see, in Genesis, at the beginning of the Bible, there is a tree of the knowledge of good and evil that's in the Garden of Eden. And then all the way at the end of the Bible in Revelation, in paradise, there's another tree. And we live our life, the Christian life, in between these two trees. Now, some of the Christmas tree legends are fact. Some are, they're verified with historical documentation. And some of the legends are legends, right? They're stories based on some kind of a vague reality that they've grown and developed over the years into these amazing stories over the centuries. Now, let's start with evergreens. The reason we use evergreens, it actually predates, there was that little story during the children's time, but it actually predates Christmas and Christians in general. Way back in the day, pagans used to use evergreens to celebrate the winter solstice. As a reminder that spring was going to come, they would go out and they would cut off branches from their evergreen trees, and they'd bring it inside in the midst of winter and the cold and the depression and the fear that came with this cold time. It was this moment of hope. This hope that spring was going to come, that this winter wasn't going to last forever. And so that's why we use the evergreen tree. It's a message of hope. That winter is not going to last forever. The valleys of our life don't last forever. Spring will come. There is hope for the future. And the medieval period out of which most of these stories developed, it's just fascinating. And they're full of all these almost fairy tale style stories for Christmas trees. There was one that I read that was, I'd never heard this before. It said that one time the Christ child visited a very poor family, and they didn't have anything to decorate their home with, and the Christ child took pity on the family, and so he took all the cobwebs in their house, and he turned the cobwebs into silver, and that's where tinsel comes from. Well, that's kind of fun. There's another story about Martin Luther. He's a very famous theologian in Germany way back in the 1500s, and so hundreds of years ago there was this theologian, and he was walking through the woods in the evening one night, and he looked up, and it was at nighttime, and he looked up and saw the stars shining through the pine trees. And he saw the stars shining through the pine trees, and he was just captured by how beautiful it was. It was so amazing that he rushed home to his family, and he's like, we have to put lights on the Christmas tree. Lights like the stars shining through the pine trees. And so because it's in the 1500s, they developed this tradition of attaching candles to dead trees. They would take candles and they would melt the wax and attach it to this tree that they had just cut down and brought inside their house. I hope I don't have to explain why it's a horrible, horrible idea. Right? They switched to electric bulbs literally as soon as they were invented. They were like, let's put these on the tree. I read these awful stories. I read a story about there was a fire in Chicago in the 1800s where the Christmas tree burned down a hospital. And that's kind of the opposite of what we're going for. And so I was writing this part. I'm just in the introduction. I was writing this past week, and I had to stop and come in here and check and make sure. Do we have a candle back there, the eternal flame? And I get the ladder, and I'm like, all right, let's make sure there's nothing around it, because it's a horrible idea. There's another story. Now, whether Martin Luther actually was the guy who started the tradition of putting lights on the Christmas tree, I don't know. That's how the story goes. Oh, and so there's all these stories about how in the beginning they used to decorate Christmas trees with edible things. They used to put gingerbread men and apples. They used to actually hang apples off the Christmas tree. And then they'd go and eat it. And that was part of it. And then when glass blowing came around, they started making glass versions of all these things that they used to hang on the trees, and then into the ornaments that we have nowadays. Did you know they used to put baby Jesus figures at the top of the tree? I've never heard of this. Has anyone ever seen that before? I've never heard of that. I thought it was really odd. I suppose they thought that hoisting babies up in the air is probably not a good example to say. But of all these traditions and all these things that I was learning about this past week, I think the one that fascinated me the most was the paradise tree. Has anyone ever heard of the paradise tree? I've never heard of it before. This is brand new to me. Apparently, some people think that the Christmas tree came from the tradition called the paradise tree. In Europe, a very, very long time ago, the Christmas Eve was known as Adam and Eve Day. Christmas Eve used to be called Adam and Eve Day. And what they would do is they would carve out this big, giant tree out of wood. And they would carve this tree out of wood, and they'd have this like parade all around town on Christmas Eve. And it was kind of an announcement. It was their way of saying, it's time for the Christmas plays. They would call them the miracle plays. Because every Christmas Eve, on Adam and Eve's Day, they would put on all these plays depicting various stories from the Bible. Back then, there wasn't a lot of literacy. There weren't a lot of Bibles, so people couldn't read. And so they knew that it was important to learn about the Bible. They knew that they needed to do that, but they couldn't read it. And so they would have all these skits and plays depicting all the major stories of the Bible on Christmas Eve. In a way, the origin story of the Christmas tree is a call to better understand this book. In Genesis, in the very beginning with Adam and Eve, we've got that tree, right? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then we follow the rest of the story through God's interactions with all of humanity. And then we get to the birth of Jesus. And then we get to the creation of the church. And then we get all the way to the end in Revelation. It's a picture of heaven. It's the last book. It's the last chapter of the last book. Literally, I'm on the last page. Chapter 22, it says, "Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, through the middle of the street on the city. And on either side of the river is the tree of life with 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore." The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation. This is a picture of what paradise might look like. And I love the imagery. It's the crystal river flowing down with the trees on either side of the banks. It's this beautiful image. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore. In our lives, there are some really beautiful things that we can see, right? Especially living in the UP. We have access to some really beautiful things in nature. But every time you see something beautiful, you have to ignore something bad, right? To get excited about this world, you kind of have to ignore all the bad stuff. And we're pretty good at that. In America, we're pretty good at ignoring the bad stuff so that we can focus on the good. But what this is telling us is that in the end, in heaven, nothing will be cursed. We don't have to ignore anything because there won't be any evil. Nothing will be cursed. It's the beauty of earth perfected. No more hatred, no more pain, no more sorrow, none of this bad stuff. It's the beauty of earth perfected. God promises us paradise. But one of the fundamental pieces of Christianity is recognizing that we are not there yet. We started in the garden, and we're headed towards paradise, but we're not there yet. We're living in this in-between time. We are between the trees. God promised us paradise. Paradise. I mean, He prepared a city for us. It says that the crystal clear waters of life are going to flow down from the throne with the trees on either side. The leaves are for the healing of the nation. Nothing will be cursed anymore. We've talked about this before. We don't really know what heaven's going to look like. Right? We've got all these pictures from the Bible, but we don't know what heaven's going to physically look like. We just don't know. We don't know what's metaphor and what's concrete. But the important thing is that nothing's going to be cursed anymore. There's no more pain. There's no more evil. We're going to live in the perfect existence. We will experience the presence of God. That's the gift. That's the promise. That's the good stuff. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It's what it feels like. And so then we get to our other scripture lesson, and this is Hebrews 11. Now, Hebrews 11, the entire chapter is all about faith. It starts right off in verse 1. It says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction of things not seen." And then the rest of the chapter, faith is believing that there is something more. There's something better. There's something worth going after. And the entire chapter is just like listing all these people in history, throughout history, who have had great faith. It talks about Abraham and Moses, the heroes of the faith, the big dogs, the people who are really important. And then we get to verse 13. It says in verse 13, "All of these died in faith without having received the promises. But from a distance they saw and they greeted them." What it's saying is that these heroes of the faith, they never actually got what they were promised. They didn't get it yet. They didn't see perfection. Heaven didn't come to earth while they were still alive. They died without that. But they saw it in the distance. They knew it was coming. They aimed their life at something better, at something bigger. And so what we see is that we don't get what was promised yet. We believe in something we can't see yet. We can't even imagine. We've never seen perfection in this world, but we believe that there's something more. We have that unrest in our heart. And so we get to verse 16. And it says, "But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them." They desire a better country, and God is not ashamed to be called their God. They desire a better country, and God is not ashamed. And I think if we flip that phrase, the other side of the coin is a little bit disturbing. They desire a better country, and God is not ashamed. So what happens when you don't desire a better country? What happens when you're comfortable with this world? If we are okay with all of this that we're living in, then maybe God is ashamed to be called our God. I often wonder if God looks at the church, the church in the U.S., and sees what we have become. If God looks at us, I wonder, do you think maybe God's ashamed of us? So many of us think if you slap the word church on the outside of the building, then of course we're blessed. Of course we're doing the right thing. What if we're not? We use God's name all the time. We talk about God a lot. What if that bothers God? What if God's embarrassed that we are the ones calling ourselves Christians? And the problem that I see so much in this world, in this town, in Negani, in Ishpeming, in Marquette County, we have learned how to settle. We have gotten comfortable in this world. We started to look around and we said, it's good enough. Right? It's like a football team showing up to a football game. They put on the pads, they put on the jersey, they show up and they look around and they're like, all right, we got dressed up. We showed up. That's all we have to do, right? That's not how you win a game. That's not how you win a championship, right? It's not about shooting. That's not how you chase perfection, improving with every drill, improving with every practice, with football and with church. It's not about dressing up and showing up. It's about that picture of something better. It's about this idea, this goal that we are shooting for, practicing for that. That's how we play the game. Something that we work to achieve, and we are not there yet. Do you look around in your life? Do you look around and say, this is good enough? Do you look around and think, this is what I want? Or do you desire something better? Do you hear those stories on the news? And do you think, I can't wait until I live in a world where this doesn't exist anymore? I can't wait until we get rid of all this stuff. Are you content with this life? I'm not talking about like getting more stuff and living comfortably. Do you have a discontent in your heart? Are you upset? Are you uncomfortable living in a world that has so much evil in it? You ever sit uncomfortably? Right? Like you sat down a little weird and your foot falls asleep or you're standing weird and you're uncomfortable and you're like, I have to move. I can't stay like this. I'm uncomfortable. You ever sit that way? And you're like, I have to move. Do you feel that way about life on this earth? Do you look around and think, I have to do something? Do you lose sleep at night thinking about the injustice and the evil and the hatred and the sorrow that's in our world? Are you bothered by all the evil that's on this planet? Now, I'll use myself as an example because I don't want anyone to be embarrassed. The answer is no. I'm not upset about the evil in the world. I'm very comfortable with the evil in the world, and I hate that. If I'm being honest with myself, I hear these stories, and I barely shrug anymore. I'm a little embarrassed, but I'll tell you this. The last time I heard one of those, these horrific stories on the news or whatever, the last time I heard, guess what I said? I said, oh, another one. It barely moves me anymore. I'm so used to it. I am getting comfortable in this world. Have we settled in? Have we given up on the idea of a better world? Why are we looking at this story and saying, well, that's just how it is now? What are we going to do? Have we given up on the idea of something better? Are we settling in? Are you comfortable with this world? Or maybe we think we deserve it. Maybe we think that that's what we deserve. We get to Hebrews verse 13. It says, they confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on the earth, for people who speak in this way make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. Maybe that's why we try to get comfortable on this earth. We think this is where we belong. This is what we deserve. Broken people for a broken world, right? One of the greatest problems when dealing with people who are in poverty or drugs or homelessness or any of these kinds of situations is a lot of these people want to be where they are. No, that's not the right way to say it. They're there because they think that's what they deserve. And it's heartbreaking. You talk to these people, and they think they are lesser than the rich people. They think that they deserve this. I'm not good enough to live a comfortable life. I belong in poverty. I belong here. This is my bed. I have made it, and this is where I will lie. We pour so much energy into propping people up. We have so much energy to get them off the couch, get them out of the pit, get them off the ground. And we're propping them up, but then as soon as we pull back our efforts, they sink right back down. Do you know what I'm talking about, right? We do so much to try and help people, and then they just deflate when we back out. When we ask them to stand on their own 2 feet. It's not hard to give a homeless guy food. What's hard is getting that man to believe he deserves it. To getting that man to believe in himself. To stand on his own 2 feet. What's hard is to encourage someone, to empower them to get off the floor, stand up for themselves, and receive the gift of life. We look around at this life. This is all we've ever seen. This is the life we know, and so we think this is where we belong. This is what we deserve. We've made our mistakes, we've made our bed, and now we lie in it. They say your homeland tells a lot about your values, your goals, and your relationships. Where you think you belong is going to determine the way you live. Where you think you belong. Where do you make your bed? Where is your home? I mean, yeah, while we're on earth, we're here, but is this where you want to stay forever? Is this where you want to spend eternity? Or do you dream of a little bit more? Dream of something better? It says in verse 15, it says, look, if they've been thinking about the land that they left behind, they would have had opportunity to go back. If you want this world to be all you've got, you can have that. It says you can go back. But what if we dreamed a little bit bigger? The heroes of the faith dreamed of a better country, a heavenly country. The first step towards eternity is recognizing that you are built for that eternity. God made you with forever in mind. He didn't want you to stay here. You are built for something more. We are seeking a homeland. We are strangers in this world, and we are not home yet. The first step to realizing that there is something better waiting for you is to realize that the first step to eternity is to realize that there is something better for you. God has bigger and better plans for this world. And so our job, our response to that is very simple. Don't get too comfortable. Don't look around and think this is what I want. Don't settle for this life. It seems obvious, but look forward to the future. Don't look around you when you're trying to figure out the future. Look forward to something you've never even dreamed of, something better than this life. God has promised a better future. That's the core of faith. Hebrews tells us it's the assurance of things that we hoped for. It's the certainty of things you had never seen before. This beautiful picture, don't give up on that. Faith is not just believing that God is out there. Faith is trusting that at the end of the day, God will reward those who seek Him. Evil lives where you let it live. Let me say that again. Evil lives where you let it live. The future starts when we sit forward and we say, no, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not comfortable anymore. I'm going to make a change. And then we do it. We are so comfortable in this life, and that bleeds into everything we do. We're just sitting here waiting for somebody else to fix all the problems. In churches especially, in most churches, we have no shortage of good ideas. We have a shortage of people to make those good ideas happen. I've got all the answers. You tell me them all the time. I write them down. I don't need more suggestions. What I need is more people willing to act on that, willing to make a difference. In that story about Martin Luther, when he was walking through the trees and he saw the stars through the pine trees, and that was the inspiration for the lights, what actually struck him that night was what Jesus was walking away from. The miracle of Christmas is that Jesus stepped into our world, right? But Jesus stepped into our world from heaven. Jesus left heaven behind. He walked away from heaven to love us, to bring us home. He got off the couch in heaven, and he came down here. He got a little uncomfortable so that we could find that comfort. I think that's an inspiration for us. I think that's an example for us. We got to get out of our comfort zone. We have to get off our couch, get out there, reach the needy. I think empowerment and helping others, I think that begins when we stop handing them things and we start partnering with them. I think there's this temptation in this season to just be generous. Just dump good stuff on people and let them sort it out. That's not the example of what God did. He didn't just dump good stuff on Mary and Joseph. He stepped into their world. He was with them. He experienced life with them. He gave himself. Now, we have done some incredible ministry in this church in the last couple of months. months. And I don't want you to feel bad about that. You've done amazing work. I'm very, very proud of this church. We've been instructed to take care of the widow and the orphan and the lowest of society, and we have done that. Thousands of dollars of food and gifts and clothing. I mean, you guys are amazing. That's awesome. I don't want you to feel bad about that. Look at how far we've come. And I wish I could just stop right there. Pat you on the head and send you home with good feelings. I wish I could just stop and say, look how far we've come. But I can't, because there's more in the Bible. It says we have to realize how much there still is to go. I think the next step is that we got to get a little uncomfortable. We have to get a little outside of our comfort zone. We have to partner with the needy to help get them out of their situations, to step into their world. And I'm not going to lie to you, that terrifies me too, because it's outside of my comfort zone too. I'm very good at two things, reading the Bible and talking. Right? I talk a lot. This is my comfort zone. I feel very safe here. I'm safe inside here. But the idea of going out there, sitting down with somebody that I don't know and talking to them about God, talking to them about how to improve their life, trying to inspire them, that's a new level for me. I've never done that. Like maybe once. And that's scary. I'm very happy with the things that you've done. I'm very pleased with this church. I'm very proud of you guys. We've come a long way. The hospitality in this room is excellent. I'm very happy with the foundation. We've got the atmosphere in this room is awesome. But now we have to build the house. I wish you didn't tell me that. I wish that's not what I read. I wish I could just be happy and content and say, we did so good. Let's be happy with how awesome we are. But that's not what I'm reading. I'm reading there's a push, there's more work to do. And I don't know what it's going to look like logistically. Like I haven't figured out what these ministries are going to look like yet. If you have ideas, come find me. But we're going to do this. We're not done yet. We have come a long way, but we're not done yet. I had no idea how much went into this Christmas tree. How much went into that symbol that's in front of us. We live life between the two trees and we are not done yet. God promised us paradise, and He wants us to want it. He encourages us to think bigger, to dream a little higher. Go after a higher standard. Don't look around at your life and think this is good enough. Don't look around at your life and think this is what I deserve. Jesus stepped out of heaven into our world. He got uncomfortable to teach us how to reach others. And so we need to step out of the comfort zone in our life to reach others, to partner with the needy, to raise them to a higher standard. And so I'll leave you with this. May you rejoice in how far you've come. Don't knock that. Be proud of all you've done. You've done amazing things. Rejoice in how far you've come, but realize how far we still have yet to go. The world's not perfect yet, so we've got more work to do. And I hope, and may God be so proud of you, not ashamed, yet proud of all, to call you His own. May God be proud to call you His own. Amen. I'd like to ask the worship team to come forward.